Hello and welcome to the first Space and Time webinar with Token Relations. Joining me today is its founder, Nate Holiday, and CMO, Kat Daly. Wow, it's so funny because I've known you for years and I just butchered your name. So I'm sorry about that.
It's okay,
but before we get started, I would like to remind listeners that during today's recording, we may discuss forward-looking statements and actual results may vary from today's statements. But would love to start with some background and context. Space and Time's STX chain is an open source layer 1 blockchain focused on securing financial data on chain. As activity on chain grows across tokenized assets, stablecoins, institutional use, its infrastructure is designed to be a system for verifying data and queries, which we will get into during this live stream. But essentially, validators verify and sign data updates by maintaining cryptographic commitments for each table and recording them on chain, essentially to ensure that data cannot be altered without detection. To start off, I want to start about the recent launch of Virtual Vaults, which brings institutional on-chain vault infrastructure to lenders and borrowers. Your team launched this, I believe, last week, give or take. Can you kind of walk us through why Virtual Vaults launched and the gap it was built to fill in the front of institutional on-chain lending?
Yeah, and thanks for having us on, Jackie. We've known each other for years. We were talking in the lead up to this. How I remember back in 2022 where you covered our
your funding
initial
launch,
investment
right?
the initial investment by Microsoft and everything that we've built since then. So I feel like we've been long friends. And
yes,
so it's
100%. I know, and apparently I can't even get Kat's name correct.
Well,
I guess I tripped you up. I tripped you up by trying to tell you how to pronounce my last name. And I jinxed it.
It's okay. Yeah. But I mean, I was thinking back to that too. I think it was 2022 when I covered the investment from Microsoft.
We were in I was in New York. I think you were in New York as well. It was for Chainlink SmartCon in 2022. Yep. And I remember the conversation we had in the interview, and we've come a long way. So we appreciate the support and partnership all these years.
Space and Time was also the last podcast I did at TechCrunch under the Chain Reaction name. Now it's Talking Tokens, as you guys know, but yeah, you guys will forever live as the last one in the feed. So you're welcome. Thank you.
No, absolutely. So, I mean, to the Virtual Vaults product and the launch of that, like what we've noticed is we work with a lot of banks throughout the world, especially in the United States. We work with a lot of institutions. We work with a lot of enterprises. We work with a lot of crypto native companies. And one of the unique things about digital assets and tokenization is there's a lot of assets that are on chain now. And those assets have to be used specifically. I mean, we can talk the Clarity Act all day, but specifically as the Clarity Act continues through our government's approval processes, these tokens have to be put to use in a provable way. They have to be put to use to secure networks. They just can't sit there and earn rewards or yield or what have you, right? And so, but these digital assets are valuable, right? And there's a whole lending infrastructure in the world where people with assets should be able to go get loans and be able to lend on their assets. But if your assets, digital assets on chain, have to be put to work, right? You can't just take this passive token and go, lend and get assets on it. So you have to have the tokens have to be put to work, but you also need to lend against those assets that are being put to work, right? So you can't over collateralize a loan. You can't give all the tokens to a lender that just sit there and they hold it. And so what Virtual Vaults does is it enables lenders to lend with the confidence that the assets are where they say they are, that the assets have the value that they say they have, that is transparent, but it doesn't take the assets out of the networks and go and sit in, some custodian somewhere that can just hold these. So we want the assets to be put to work, but we want the assets to be able to participate in the lending around the global financial system. So that's really the reason why we have Virtual Vaults. It's one of the reasons why we built it. And it's the reason we built it is because customers are asking for it, right? There's large crypto institutions that are asking for it. There's large enterprises that are asking for it. And then there's large lenders that want it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good product market fit for on-chain credit lending and borrowing right now. Vaults in general is like a very hot conversation. I mean, we even see like companies completely dedicated solely to vaults. So the fact that you guys are getting into this, speaks to that side of the market. But what about the specific existing infrastructure wasn't working for these institutions, enterprise businesses, et cetera, that came to you guys and were like, hey, you should create this?
Yeah, the archaic reporting around the world and the processes are not compatible with on-chain markets, right? I mean, you can't take old tools that are off-chain, old data processes that aren't transparent, aren't verifiable, and get the confidence and the transparency that you need in the new world. So the institutions that we're talking about are the largest banks around the world. We're not talking about on-chain crypto lending between one small protocol and another. We're talking about a mature process where they have to have audit, compliance, reporting, and that reporting structure is archaic, and we're revamping that to work with on-chain markets going forward.
Yeah. And in the Space and Times post about virtual vaults, it said, quote, the basic pattern of connecting data sources, running a solvency check, and producing a standardized attestation confirming that a borrower's assets exceeded their liabilities is a reasonable starting point. But the distance between a standardized attestation and what a lender's risk committee actually needs to see is significant. Can you kind of talk about like where that approach falls short for an institutional lender, extending a large credit facility, and how this would handle that differently?
Yeah, I think the crypto market, the tokenization of capital markets is continuously evolving, transforming, it's growing, it's changing over time. The value of those digital assets change drastically over a period of time. And so lenders want continuous reporting over time throughout the life of the loan. And that's really what Virtual Vaults provides. It provides this agile framework that allows you to track, audit, get transparency, have confidence that what you're lending on is real and what you're lending on exists. And you know exactly where it is at all times in the network, right? There's full transparency where those tokens are and what they're powering and how they operate within the network.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this early infrastructure was built for crypto native participants. And even today, most of it is extremely friendly to them. And then like for traditional people, they're like, what did you just say to me? Or like, what are you trying to offer me? Right.
Yeah.
So maybe this is a question both for you, Nate, and Kat, but like, how do you think about making this appealing to non-crypto native institutions, participants, et cetera? And do you find today that it is accessible, or there still is this kind of gap here where the language or the product is not meeting people outside of this bubble, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely still true across the board, but Space and Time has been built to close that gap really since day one. I mean, years ago when we started, we took the bet to build in crypto because we believed then, as we still do now, that the future of finance lies in the convergence of traditional markets and on-chain markets. And so we built Space and Time to handle both off-chain data systems and processes and on-chain data and assets. And that's, I think, kind of the primary reason Microsoft chose to invest, because they shared this vision. And a lot of the reason we had such good early traction with enterprises and institutions long before we saw the wave of adoption that we're seeing now over the last year. So Virtual Vaults is kind of the latest expression of that vision, I guess, marrying on-chain yield and the appetite for that with the compliance and security that traditional enterprises and institutions offer or require, really.
Yeah. Are you saying the same thing, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, there is Kat spoke earlier to the Microsoft investment and why they backed us. There is a clear difference between how native crypto companies work and how large institutions, banks, and enterprises work. And we're that bridge, right? We provide this bridge that we can take new tools and apply them to enterprises, institutions throughout the world. And I think we have the ability to service this better than anyone in the industry.
Mhm. How do you guys think about chain alliance or being chain agnostic? I know Virtual Vaults is designed to be chain agnostic, and then a lot of people that we, speak to as part of these live streams is that, they're aligned to one specific chain or they are the chain. From your perspective on the design standpoint and everything, like what does it really unlock to not just be tethered to one specifically, but kind of just open across them all?
Yeah, I mean, I guess similarly to how we built for both enterprises and off-chain markets and on-chain protocols, we decided to build Space and Time to be chain agnostic from the beginning because we want developers to be able to come build where they want. And there are trade-offs across these different chains in terms of speed and performance and decentralization. And we're not here to tell you which one's better. We're here to provide the verifiable data infrastructure to allow you to scale your business on the chain of your choice. And the same is true of virtual vaults, right? So we want lenders to deploy vaults on the chain of their choice. Deploy the vault where you want, deploy it to the borrowers that you want. Space and Time is kind of just the infrastructure underneath that secures it and connects it to your existing processes. And so for us, that just opens up a much broader market and who we can service, both from a developer perspective and an institutional perspective. And then for the industry as a whole, it kind of, I guess, hedges the bets, right? Like regardless of what ecosystem is popular at the time or where more people are building, this tool exists for everyone. So we work with a lot of the major ecosystems like Ethereum, Base, Sui, Stellar. They're all close partners of ours. And it's been cool to get to provide this infrastructure to developers across all of crypto.
Mhm. Do institutions care about chain alliance or what chains it's deployed on, or they just want the product to work?
They just want the product to work, and it's really interesting in working with these large institutions. A lot of them are building their own. I don't think there's really a moat around a blockchain per se with institutions. They're building their own, or if they're not building their own, they understand it's very easy to switch from blockchain to blockchain. So the decision process isn't as rigorous as you would per se, like choosing a database provider or a cloud provider in the Web2 technology stack, where it's very sticky when it takes years and years to implement and to build, right? That decision is more complex. When institutions come to us and say, hey, we're building on Sui, or we're building on Stellar, or we're building on Base or ETH or ZK Sync or someone, we provide services for all of them. So as Kat said, we're chain agnostic. Sometimes they want us to put our thumb on the scale and, weigh in on these, these decisions. And, we try not to weigh in. We're a service provider. We're not a distribution channel for these chains. But at the end of the day, we want the best technology to service the specific use cases for these institutions. And there are some pros and cons to blockchains and different use cases. If you want a fast, cheap chain, right, because you're doing a ton of transactions, Ethereum might not be the one to build on, right? Because as we know, as of today, gas is very high to make a transaction, right? If you're doing billions of transactions a day. So different chains have different use cases and value propositions. But most of the banks and institutions we deal with, they are pretty much chain agnostic.
Mm-hmm. So what is still missing today then from this sector that institutions are still asking for, whether it's something like, okay, we're in V1 of virtual vaults, and there's this technical aspect that we really want to build in V2 and so on and evolve it into, or maybe something external, which we talked about before we started recording, was the regulatory clarity front, which we could get into as well. But I think there's two sides to the coin, right? Technical and regulation. So
yeah, I think the first thing is, they're leaning into creative outcomes, right? They all have these innovation labs. Just talking about the Clarity Act today, I saw one amendment get passed that, every bank should have an AI, sandbox You know, a lot of banks have these, you know, AI teams that are building out unique capabilities. And innovation is something that they're always looking to you know, move forward across institutions, whether they're enterprises, banks, what have you. They're always looking to push forward on innovation. But the Clarity Act will help, right? There's a lot of POCs, there's a lot of use cases, but it feels like the industry at large, with the institutions and enterprises, they're waiting for more clarity. And you know, the thing I think that they're really missing the most is native crypto talent, right? To programatize and productionize native blockchain technology is hard. It really is hard. You have to learn literally a new language. You have to learn a new skill set. You have to have new tools and capabilities. And a lot of these banks, they don't have the people that can implement these successfully. And so they have to learn on the job as they go. And I think we're seeing all throughout the market, you're seeing large institutions putting out job descriptions for crypto friendly, crypto native, crypto adjacent, blockchain, you know, capable employees. And we really need employees in these institutions that truly understand blockchain technology, because it will just accelerate the adoption of blockchain technology in all the large institutions. And so, you know, that's something that I think the whole industry needs to think about is how do we get more talent into institutions? I just tell you, Jackie, you know, before I started Space and Time, I worked at a company called Teradata. It's a large scale data warehousing company. It's a big, you know, the largest data warehouses run on Teradata systems. And, you know, a lot of companies, when they go to, you know, partner with other companies, they have all these clauses in their contract, like you can't hire our employees.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, at Teradata, it was interesting because every time we had a solution engineer or an architect, you know, tell us like, hey, I'm going to go work at my customer, right? I'm going to go work at the customer that was paying us for me to implement and develop and support the technology of Teradata at the time. We celebrated it. It was awesome, right? I mean, now you have someone that truly understands your value proposition. Now you have someone that truly understands your technology on the inside, right? Supporting the vision of the company, supporting the vision of the technology. And I think, you know, we as builders in the blockchain, we need to really think about how we, you know, cross the line of, you know, making sure talent is in these institutions so we can guide these institutions in the right direction, rather than having the split between, you know, the boomers and non-boomers, the crypto people and non-crypto people. And it just needs to be, you know, decentralized technology and on-chain finance.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say it's kind of ironic too, because I hear, you know, you see a lot of layoffs in crypto. I've heard from a lot of my friends that work as recruiters that crypto native projects are not necessarily prioritizing crypto native talent right now. They want people coming from the traditional finance side of things, but that's not true of these institutions. They are looking for people who are native to the space and can like full on lead digital asset strategy. And like in our conversations with these banks and whatnot, like they're all wanting to get into this. They're wanting to tokenize assets. They're wanting to mint stable coins. They're wanting to explore this space more and more, but they don't always even know where to start or have a very good idea of like how to pursue that strategy. And so like a lot of the work we do with those partners is like kind of like consulting, right? Like helping them form that strategy from the ground up and helping them shape what it looks like. So I think it's bullish overall that, you know, they're still looking to hire people like us, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say on that front too, is like, it's no longer like a nice to have, but a requirement at these banks to have that experience if you're going into the digital asset sector on their teams, or even on our side too, where it's like, it's a nice to have, but I think we're going to kind of, and we've heard this word 100 times, but like the convergence of DeFi and TradFi. And it's like, it's going to be kind of like interwoven between both sides of the coin, hopefully.
Yeah. And we just
Yeah.
need to accelerate that talent, right? We need more talent in institutions.
Yeah. I mean, with everything kind of ramping up right now on, hopefully the clarity front, regulations in the US, you guys launching this product, conversations with banks, prime brokers, asset managers, what do those look like right now compared to maybe even like 6 months to a year ago?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are getting very creative on use cases, right? We're talking about tokenized money market funds. We're talking about collateral loan obligations, CLOs. We're talking a lot about virtual vaults. I mean, when we first went down the virtual vaults route, the question was, would a large institution or a lender even consider giving loans where it's not over collateralized and the tokens remain on chain supporting the various services that are required. Um, and so I think the institutions are really coming around to the idea of innovation in a different way, and I think it's all a positive thing for us. Just the Clarity Act. We just announced the Clarity Compliance Framework today. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about providing full transparency, full auditing, full reporting, support around, are your assets where you are, and can you settle them up on a daily basis? Think about it, tokenized money market funds. We have to settle them on both sides of the cash basis versus the tokens every day. So I think a lot of innovation still coming.
Mhm.
It's been
On the
cool to see
clarity
that.
front, yeah.
Sorry, I keep
No,
jumping in ahead of
we're
you, Jackie.
we're both eager. Go ahead, Kat.
It's been cool to see the evolution too, because we've been working with a lot of these guys for several years. And years ago, it started off as like they just wanted to know what was happening on chain. And a lot of them would use Space and Time for just really high quality on chain data and analytics, just to see like what are people doing? What are my customers, as Fidelity, for example, doing on chain? And how does that map to my business? And that's evolved over time, right? Like then they started looking into stable coins and tokenizing fairly simple assets. And now they're moving, like Nate said, into tokenizing much more complex assets, in part because infrastructure like Space and Time exists to support that. Like we're in conversations with an unnameable bank about tokenizing CLOs, collateralized loan obligations, which are these like really archaic, data heavy assets, where that require tons of like manual reporting and data roll up. And to tokenize that without something like Space and Time would be, I mean, really difficult, require a ton of like custom infrastructure spun up within the bank itself. And like we said a minute ago, these guys are like really eager, but don't necessarily have a ton of expertise in this space. So with Space and Time, they're able to like kind of tackle that new frontier, and it really opens up the type of assets that they're able to put on chain.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think it kind of ties into what I want to talk about next with you guys too, is like switching gears. Another product launch from this past month was Dreamspace, which you guys know, obviously, but it was launched in collaboration with Microsoft Azure AI Foundry and Base. Can you kind of talk about the impetus behind Dreamspace, what it is, why does it matter today? And then we can go into a few more questions I have on that front.
Yeah, so we've been working with Microsoft around AI products since the inception of Space and Time, and Make Infinite Labs has research developers that have been worked with Microsoft for many years now, and we've been in AI labs co-developing, co-creating products. We were the first one to come out with text to SQL for analytic reporting, for dashboarding. That came out of the Microsoft AI labs. We've been working on Dreamspace for many years now. And the impetus around this is AI is coming, AI is here, right? You see a lot of people doing a lot of cool things with AI. We realize that AI is going to supercharge the creatives of the world, and it's going to put a lot of stress on those that are punching the time clock, right? Those that have a cushy job, sit at home, do a couple emails, do a couple video chats, right? We all know the COVID, pre-COVID era of you have these corporations with 10,000, 100,000 people, And sometimes, you wonder, what could all these people be doing on a daily basis? And we're starting to see like that transformation happen in real time, right? You're seeing Facebook announce layoffs, AWS and Amazon announce layoffs. Like, it's happening throughout the world, where technology companies are realizing that they can get a lot more done with less people because of AI. And we saw this coming from years prior to today, right? And so we wanted to build a tool that could help creatives create something that they can own in the future, right? And a creative is not a developer. When I was going to college 20 years ago, I was told, like, you should learn to code, right? You learn to code, you're set. Nowadays, nobody's telling kids, like, go to college, learn to code, and you're set, right? And in fact, when we put our kids in school, there are a lot of studies out there today that talk about the creativity of children decrease over the more years that they are sitting in a structured, schooling system. And so what we need is to empower the creative minds of the future to build new cool things. And what kind of jobs can they get when they come out of school? And how are they going to provide for a family? And how are they going to, own a house someday? I think all these questions are difficult questions in society. We're seeing marriage rates drop. We're seeing birth rates drop. We're seeing anxiety increase in the youth. And so we really need to provide this inspiring kind of message to the next generation that you can go out and you can create your future. And no one's going to limit you, right? You're not limited by skill sets. You're not limited by your IQ. You're not limited by your technical coding capabilities. You're limited by your own creativity, and we need to power that. And so DreamSpace is this product that anyone can pick up. They can build on chain. They can build new applications. They can build products, and they can start building their business even before they even graduate school and college. And so we're partnering with all these universities throughout the world to really give students and children the power to create their future. And, if you're looking to, change your current career plans, it provides a great platform where you can go and build and just try things out, right? You just want to try things out to see what sticks, and build and build and build, and not try to build this like monolithic, awesome project. Just start building stuff and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, I love that idea. And I think the name itself speaks for itself, Dream Space. And it does speak to kind of the evolution of like what coding actually means right now, and the accessibility of it all and what's possible to be built now that we have AI tools in place. Given that it is like a no code AI app, what have you kind of seen so far in terms of like the total addressable market now for space and time on this front, and the developer pool that you're able to tap into? Or I guess like the just general human interest, because I don't even think I'd call myself a developer even if I use this, right? Like what kind of doors does it open up then?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know like how much weight that word is even going to carry in the new world, developer. What does that even mean? But I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of accessibility. It just makes coding and building, and specifically building on chain, accessible to the next generation in a way that we haven't seen before. And kind of going off what Nate was saying too, like AI is sort of this double-edged sword for people entering the job market today, because on one hand, you can just let it crush you and let it take your jobs and let it kind of like blot out, the brightness of your future, or you can use it as a tool and become proficient in it and learn how to like use it to take control and build something new for yourself. And that was sort of like the vision behind DreamSpace. And we've seen a lot of adoption, particularly among college age students, which I think is cool because like to me, in my mind, that is who is the perfect fit for this, right? Like people who are, adults and like, developed as people and have an idea of what they want for their future, but also see where the future is headed as of now and don't want to get crushed under the wheel of AI. So it's been cool to see like this next generation and these younger people sort of like step into this and use DreamSpace to take more control of their future. And on the space and time front, it really completely opens up our TAM, right? Like space and time is built primarily for developers and institutions building financial use cases who want secure data infrastructure underneath that, which is extremely important, but also fairly specific. Whereas Dreamspace is built for literally anyone and anything. And so we've seen use cases and apps built with Dreamspace ranging from like prediction markets to, websites for nonprofits, to marketplaces for art and fashion, to just like little hobby use cases that people want to spin up really quick. And so it's been exciting from like the space and time perspective to step back and see our ecosystem expand in this way and get to touch the lives, I guess, not to be cheesy, but like to get to touch the lives of so many people and young people in a way that we might not have been able to without the Dreamspace product.
Yeah. I mean, with space and time's like verifiable data ecosystem too in mind here, like what does that actually change in terms of like the ability to use that to build these like no code apps, right? Because like if I were to use like another maybe platform or software for that, it doesn't come with that whole database. So how do you see that
Exactly,
kind of
yeah.
unlocking more opportunity than like maybe somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, if you use literally any other competitor to Dreamspace and you try and actually like publish your app in production, you have to go through some sort of process to spin up a database. And typically that's through some third-party partnership that platform has with a database provider. And it just adds a lot of unnecessary overhead and kind of removes some of the accessibility that we were talking about before, because suddenly there's this like now fairly technical, fairly complex thing that you have to figure out to do in order to get your app to work. Whereas Dreamspace, it just comes preloaded, right? And kind of on the flip side too, like space and time makes Dreamspace easier to use, but Dreamspace also makes space and time easier to use. Like data, tools, and infrastructure are notoriously difficult. Like if you're trying to run business intelligence, if you're trying to run analytics, if you're trying to develop an app, you pretty much have to have an engineering background or hire someone who does. Otherwise, you're going to sit on the sidelines. And so like we've spent a lot of time and resources alongside Microsoft over the years, just focused on making this easier and more accessible so that not only can you build, your dream app and your dream business on chain, but you can also just like use on-chain data more effectively and more easily with some of these tools.
Yeah, no, and I'd just say, like Kat said it so well, right? If you want to build an app, use Dreamspace. It's built on top of the space and time database, right? So you don't need to go out and and databases are expensive, right? If you want to go spin up another database, it's very expensive. Um, and space and time is built on a blockchain, right? So now you have the deployment of smart contracts that can be audited directly in Dreamspace. So you have that full stack, right? If you want to build an app, you can build an app. If you want to deploy an app and make it production ready, the database is already built in and it's verifiable database. And if you want to build it on chain, it's built on a blockchain, so you can deploy a smart contract and have it fully audited with our AI tools. So it just makes it so much easier to build a deployed, mature application and an on-chain application as well.
How do you guys ultimately see like this application pool? I was gonna say developer pool, but I don't think that always applies to these people. Is like the application pool changing for these no code builders, AI native developers, institutional engineers, all these different like categories all coming in together at the same time?
I just go back to, I know it's a marketing term that we use, but I go back to Dreamspace, and space and time is built for creators, right? And I just think we were put on this earth to create things, right? To create beautiful things, to develop ourselves personally and develop what our interests are. And so I think at the end of the day, everyone wants to be a creator, and I think all these like developers, auditor, all of these things are just I want to see it condensed down into become a creator, right? The barrier of entry should be gone, right? Anyone can do it. It's going to be faster, smarter, better in the future. And I'd like to see all those kind of terms go away.
Yeah. I also want to bring up the W3IO partnership that also, I believe, transpired in April. You guys had a busy month, which is good. When you're talking to these enterprises about what tools they're looking for, what do you see as like a reoccurring trend? And then how does W3's partnership fit into that narrative on this front? Because it has to do with AI agents, right?
Yeah. Enterprise they're adopting AI at the fastest rate of technology that I've ever seen in 22, 23 years of working with enterprises. So AI adoption is being adopted faster than any other technology that I've seen. And you know, how do you put these AI tools and agents and workflows is going to be critical because they're doing it with less people, right? So we just talked about companies are going to have less people in on their payrolls, and they need to do more work. And so these AI workflows are going to be critical to how businesses operate in the future. And so, Space and Time, is built to do that in a verifiable, auditable way. And so we think about, when AI agents are, not just transacting on chain, but they're just transacting in the world in general. You need an auditable way to manage and drive transparency and accountability through these workflows. And that's what Space and Time is built to do.
Mm. Are there any specific tools or integrations that enterprises want on that note that Space and Time plans to add or enhance on the front of like interoperability, the chain agnostic aspect we brought up earlier, or these AI systems across the board or even within Dreamspace?
Yeah, no, as I said, enterprises are adopting AI faster than any other technology in previous history. But the AI models are vast, right? There's all these companies building AI models. There's, every time, Anthropic releases a model, someone else releases a model, and it's faster, better, cheaper. But there's going to continue to be AI models, and they're going to proliferate the world. I think that, verifiable training data for compliance and auditing is going to be really critical, right? When not only are corporations going to pick a model, and every corporation will pick a model, my guess is every corporation will use all the models. And so, it's not going to be like one model to rule the world. It's going to be, a combination of models, across a single organization as well as all the organizations, which becomes very, very complex. And so, we tend to want to lean into verifiable training data and to support companies make sense of that as well.
I think also something I want to ask you guys about too is like as Space and Time dives deeper into the institutional data layer to power tokenized assets, stablecoin reserves, attestations for banks and enterprises, like what does that ultimately align with the vision for your company going forward? Obviously, I've known you guys for a number of years now, and I've seen kind of the evolution of it all, right? But can you kind of walk us through how this showcases the capabilities of the network and like what this means for future integrations?
Yeah. So we've always built Space and Time technology to be enterprise grade ready. Our ZK proofs, you see all these announcements come out about ZK proofs, and the question is, well, is that for a single set of data or is that for the speed of business? Can you do it across 20 million rows of data in under a second? Can you really operate ZK proofs at business scale? And the question is, they can't, right? The answer to that question is that they can't. There is no other technology that can verify on-chain and off-chain data as fast as Space and Time at scale, right? And so that's where our mode is. That's what we're building towards. And we believe that, as the adoption grows in the enterprise, we become more needed than ever before because they need to operate it at scale. Doing a proof on a single set of data in a single row isn't going to be sufficient for these large businesses.
Yeah, for sure. How else do you think Space and Time wants to kind of leverage the momentum today to attract more institutional players like asset managers, banks, and so on? I know you guys are already having those conversations, right? But I think the attention is here. And so how do you plan on grasping that even further?
Yeah, I think part of it is we've built large scale enterprise technology, which is fantastic for the roadmap that we're going to and where the US is in adopting technology. We have built specifically with Microsoft because they are deeply entrenched in all the largest governments and businesses throughout the world. And that bridge between a secure infrastructure, all of these, corporations are running on Microsoft Azure. They're running on Microsoft technology products. And so building that bridge directly from Microsoft, I think is a value and an advantage to us. I would like to say, at the end of the day, we're such visionaries that we had it all planned out in 2022 and we just knew the world was coming here.
Yeah.
That is how we planned it. But I realize some of it is just good fortune, right? You're building at the right place at the right time and the dominoes start to fall in your favor. And you just keep building with conviction. And so I think we're at the right place at the right time with the right partners. And I think at the end of the day, our team's done a lot of hard work as well, right? We've had to do the work of building enterprise grade scalable technology. And I think that's where we're going to play. We're going to play in the mature enterprises that are adopting blockchain technology.
Yeah, I would just add too, we've already kind of what Nate alluded to, we've already done the work to build this infrastructure and stand it up. And we know that it works. We know it's secure. We know it functions in production. And so now it's just kind of a distribution race, right? And the partnership that we have with Microsoft and the way that we're embedded in the Microsoft Azure ecosystem gives us such a leg up for that distribution. Because like Nate said, that's where they're all building. They all have a relationship with Microsoft in their own right. And so having them as partners and, M12, their venture arm, as investors has been super valuable for us to get a foot in the door with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people realize it, but last May we announced that blockchain data, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Sui network data are all on Microsoft Fabric data provider from Microsoft, available to all their 27,000 or so customers throughout the world. And Space and Time is the data provider for Microsoft Fabric for the blockchain technology. And so I think things like that, where we are the provider of blockchain data for these companies, should go noticed. And at times I think people don't understand the magnitude of these types of partnerships and these types of data products that we're already putting out there in the world, because it lays a foundation for mass adoption in the future.
Yeah. What was the outcome from that? If we're fast forwarding a year from last year to now from that announcement, what was the material change you noticed?
The material change I noticed is the usage of the data, right? This data was provided to, every large institution, every large enterprise that's a Microsoft Azure customer for free, right? All you have to do is pay Azure Compute on the data that you want to query, but you're not actually paying for the data. So the great thing for us is it creates an entry point to go talk to any customer at any time about the use of the data that's available to them for free through Microsoft Azure Fabric. It's not a revenue generating product for us, but we didn't build it for that, right? We built it for the ability for large enterprises to adopt this technology going forward. And I think, it's opened up a lot of doors. We have, a lot of relationships and a lot of customers and a lot of clients that, we probably would have never been able to get to if we didn't have this ability to provide them services.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge that they now have access to this and they're using it on the back end. It doesn't need a flashy headline for it to be real, right?
Yeah, that's right.
100%.
Anyone with a Microsoft Fabric account can go and, run this data today. So,
yeah. So thinking long term, let's say maybe the next 4 years to get us to the end of this decade, how do you think about Space and Time in the role of reshaping data, AI, and finance intersecting into kind of maybe this one big pool?
Yeah, I think about, AI here's on-chain finances here. What was the other one you said?
And data.
Yeah. I think of
holy mecca. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think of AI here, on-chain finance, capital markets over here, right? If you or on-chain finance, however you want to say it. But I think below that is this data infrastructure layer. And I think in the future, it has to be verifiable. And if you want to put data, you just can put, you can put, AI here, on-chain finance here, and just databases in general over here, right? Every database in the world that's running SQL needs to be verified in the future if it's going to, coexist with AI. AI has to be verifiable if it's going to be trusted and transparent in the future. And on-chain finance is transparent, but we need to take all the off-chain assets and digitize them and tokenize them. And you can't do it without a verifiable data layer. So I just see this verifiable data layer that, underpins all three of those that is going to power, and it has to be powered by something like space and time.
Yeah, almost like a Venn diagram, right? Like all of these things are going to continue to converge as like enterprises adopt AI for their workflows, as institutions start to bring markets on chain. Like all of these things are starting to kind of like move together, and space and time sort of sits at the center of that to be able to service all of them. And not only service all of them, but also like connect them together in new ways. So the future's bright for us.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific initiatives or partnerships in the pipeline that can make this kind of a reality? Hinting at?
Yeah, we've got, can't say names, but we've got some major US-based banks interested in tokenizing assets. We've got some major institutional focused market makers looking to borrow on chain through virtual vaults. We've got banks looking to lend on chain through virtual vaults, kind of a tongue twister. We've got protocols like looking for more secure data infrastructure to just power what they're doing on chain. We've got stablecoin issuers who are looking to, deploy new like activity-based rewards to be Clarity compliant. Space and time is really well suited to service that. And especially in new markets too, like stablecoin issuers outside of the US, which I think is an exciting, burgeoning use case we're going to start seeing. But it's been cool. It's been cool to see adoption expand, like both on the enterprise and institutional side, but still a lot of demand on the crypto native side as well. Like both sectors are growing, and like we've said, all stream, they're starting to converge. So yeah, space and time is ready.
Yeah. To wrap things up, last thing I want to ask you guys, is there anything specific that you would like to see built on space and time, Dream Space, that you haven't seen today? Especially now that, AI agents are starting to manage real capital. We've talked about agentic commerce a lot, and I'm sure, Kat, you have those conversations too at Consensus. But in terms of like what's possible on Dream Space and like with space and time's technology, what is something that you haven't seen yet that you're like, that would be really cool?
Well, as far as the agentic commerce, I think, you can open up X and just scroll through and you just see it. And it's like, it's almost like just a bunch of buzzwords now, right? It's like everyone's take is agentic commerce is coming. We're going to be the agentic blockchain of the future. We're the AI agentic framework or blockchain. And, it's becoming like just noise. But I do think that it is real, right? Databases that run throughout the world are going to continue to power business, people, transactions. Those are going to move on chain, and those databases have to be verified through ZK proofs, especially if it's a SQL database. So I absolutely think that is going to be a huge area where we can play in, and the world is just at the, if we're talking about a football field, we're at the 10-yard line, on our end of the end zone, not
we got ways to go. Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the things that I'm probably most excited about is, I think that we talk about on-chain finance. We talk about tokenization of digital assets. We talk about the world moving the finances, to a more verifiable state. I think what I would like to see, and where I think we're going to get to faster than most people realize, is the energy commerce, right? Which is everything will deal with energy, right? Today we have a US dollar, which is being hyperinflated away. We're seeing AI and the energy and, the consumption of energy continue to expand. as the world consumes more and more energy, I think we are going to transact more in energy than we do in dollars, right? And that's a concept that, seems like way out there, right? Like, wait, you're saying dollars is going to go away and we're going to transact in energy? I'm saying that, Bitcoin really is digital energy, and energy is what powers the real world. It's not dollars, right? It's actual energy. And the tokenization of that energy or the monetization of that energy is going to be really exciting to see like how that comes about. Like, how do you actually tokenize and monetize energy? How do you distribute energy in an effective way? Am I going to earn energy for working at my job? Do I get to bank energy in a 401k in the future? And what does that look like? Like, all of these concepts are kind of out there, but I think that future is going to come much quicker than we all think, just because unfortunately the world has a salacious appetite to spending, and that appetite creates inflation, and it's only going to persist higher for longer. And so at the end of the day, the world's going to have to come back to something that can't be inflated away as easily, and that can transact throughout the world. And I think, if Michael Saylor was on this, he'd say that's Bitcoin, it's digital energy. But I think it goes beyond digital energy. How do we tokenize coal energy, nuclear energy, sun energy, solar energy? And so I'm excited to see like how that all plays out and how that actually manifests itself in the future for us.
Yeah, 100%. Kat, what are you excited about?
I'll keep it simple. I'm excited about AI agent payments on chain. I'm excited about the progress we've seen in that over the last few months, and how Space and Time is really well positioned to kind of be the data layer that informs the transactions that they're making, and then also provides like a compliance record back to whoever's deploying these agents, so that they know they're making decisions based off the right inputs. And I'm excited about new asset classes trading on chain, like commodities on chain, equities on chain, enabling 24/7 trading, enabling access to new markets. I think that's really exciting, and that takes a lot of data as well.
100%. Amazing. Well, Nate, Kat, thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you to everyone for listening in. Looking forward to doing this again next quarter.
Thanks for having
Thanks,
us.
Jackie.
Yeah.